Recording from our respective locations, I'm Public Affairs Director Matthew Huffman, and this is Momentum, a webcast produced by your coalition, connecting advocates across our state. So this is the month of August, and I'm excited to welcome two new folks to the webcast. This entire newsletter is really focused around the benefits of membership and everything that we work to provide to our member agencies. And so who better to talk about that than two folks from our member services team, as well as our partnership development coordinator. So this month, I am talking with Heidi Coleman, Kim Howard, and Huvona Watkins. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So like I had mentioned in the quick introduction, this entire conversation is really going to be focused around member benefits. And we're really trying to reiterate that in all of our articles in the newsletter this month. But considering that, Kim, you and I just attended the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit, and then Heidi and Huvona, you two just attended the National Sexual Assault Conference, this felt like a really good opportunity for us to talk about education as a core service of our coalition, but also to really talk about how we view education as a member benefit. So like I had mentioned, education it's in our mission. It's a core service to member agencies. But part of that is at MOCADSV, we really operate under the philosophy that education should be accessible to all, and education and knowledge should be shared. And so with that in mind, I wanted us to talk about how at MOCADSV, we really prioritize professional development for our staff and as then a benefit that we pass along to members. So to kind of get us started in that conversation, I wanted to just open up and see from your all's perspective, what were some of the things that really stood out for you in the summit and in the conference that you attended? And I think a natural place to kick off that conversation is with keynote speakers, because we all know that people really look forward to hearing the keynote speakers at conferences. There are always some really big names that we're excited to hear from. So want to open it up and see what really stood out. Heidi and Huvona, I'm going to start with y'all to give us an idea of the National Sexual Assault Conference. So Heidi, let's get started with you. What were the keynotes like?
Anytime going to NSAC and even staying at home to do NSAC is the best. They always have really great keynote speakers. This time, I didn't know a whole lot of them, but getting to hear their stories and their advocacy and what they are doing is just amazing. My favorite is Lydia XZ Brown, and I'll talk about a little bit what they had to say during their keynote speech.
Awesome. So this is my first time being able to attend NSAC, so I was already super excited about that. So in itself, it didn't matter who was speaking. I got to be in community with some wonderful folks from everywhere, because it wasn't just United States. But the keynote I really enjoyed was the first one, and one of the guest speakers was Carolyn Randall Williams, and she's a writer. She's a poet. She's an author, and she really spoke from the heart of her and her family's generation of oppressive behaviors, of sexual abuse, and just got really personal with you. And as you sit back and you're listening and able to reflect, you kind of can reflect on some of the experiences of your own family members or people that you know. And it really resonated with me, as it was kind of like a personal thing that my family had went through with intergenerational trauma and layers of that, and how you can heal from it. And so, yes, there are those horrible things, but how do you transcend to get to a better place? And what can we do to support survivors? So I really, really enjoy how she spoke about it. And with her, she spoke about how her and her grandmothers healed through writing cookbooks. And I like cooking, so that was really right up my alley.
I love that. I love the idea of talking about your connection to your grandmother and really expressing your family's lived experience. through cooking and through a cookbook. It now makes me want to go and buy that cookbook as well.
Yes, it's a whole lot of them. I'm thinking the same thing. Like, I need some of these and they're Southern, so some good Southern recipes.
Even better. Yep. I see Kim shaking her head too. Well, yeah, I appreciate y'all sharing that. I know in years past, whenever I've been able to attend NSAC, I always really like the keynotes. And one that I always really think about was a few years ago when I was able to see Tracy Wright from the Resource Sharing Project in North Carolina Sexual Assault Coalition. She gave such a really powerful closing plenary session. And luckily, they were able to record it. And I've gone back and watched it several times since then. So I appreciate y'all kind of sharing out what really stuck with you.
One of
Heidi,
the cool things now with NSAC with it been online is you can actually go back and watch those plenary speakers on the website. And even they share it Facebook Live during the moment, and knowing that there's more than 5,000 people watching at that time, because when we're in a conference, like a conference hall, you can only fit so many, and to know that many people are participating in that is just wonderful.
And what a really cool example of community. You don't just have to be in the same room together to feel that community. Mm-hmm. So Kim, I want to turn it over to you and ask for your perspective on the keynotes at the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit.
Man, they had some good ones. So, Angela Davis is always a rock star in the fight for racial equity that she's done probably her whole life, it seems like. But the one that stood out to me, of course, was Edgar Villanueva. He has done a lot of work within communities, trying to bridge some of the gaps, trying to challenge some of the ideas that we have about communities and what they're supposed to look like and how they're supposed to function. And I thought he was really insightful. His books have been amazing. I followed him. I feel like one of those fangirls, I followed him through college. We did a lot of stuff with his work. And so I was kind of fangirling, I guess, like, oh, here's the Beatles kind of thing. But I was really impressed by him, the way he spoke, and just overall trying to bridge that sense of community. How can a community come together to best support all the people in the community, not just singling out certain ones that are important in the moment? So I thought they did a good job of that, just really speaking to a community as a whole.
I agree, Kim. I thought that he gave a really great opening keynote and really, I think, framed the summit in a really good way of thinking about how we have to challenge some of the norms in nonprofits and the nonprofit sector in general. So I thought that he did a great job opening it up. I also agree with you. Angela Davis is a rock star. I loved being able to hear from her. I thought that there was a really great Q&A where she engaged in a dialogue with the moderators and questions from participants. There was a quote from her that I wrote down and I come back to a lot and have been thinking about since then. And it was from a participant who asked her about the word equity and what equity means to her. And she said, equity is a great word and a great concept, but for me, I prefer the word justice. And it's because for her, equity is intended to be something that talks about a relational benefit. But whenever you're really thinking about how things aren't equal and we have all of these social inequalities, we have to think more about justice and how we provide justice to people than only thinking about how to create equitable relationships between people. And so I've really been thinking about that we have to go beyond equity. And when we think about equity so much right now, what does that actually mean to us?
Yeah, when she speaks, I can't imagine her doing anything else with her life, because it's almost like she's singing it to you. Like, she just has this melodic way of speaking that's so soothing. Like, she could be punching me in the throat with what she's saying, because it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. But it's so soothing. Like, she could just say anything that I'm telling you, she needs to be president, because she could just say anything and we'd be like, yeah.
Yep. Yes, I agree with
drinking
that.
The Kool-Aid moment, right? I'm telling you, just her delivery, her speech. It's just, as a whole, it was just like a breath of fresh air, just seeing her speak and really listening to her words and knowing that she's very intentional with her words. And she's very, I really like that about her.
Yep. Well, I also want to now get down into the meat of every conference, or, for our vegan and vegetarian listeners, your meat alternative to a conference. But really getting down into the sessions and the different things that stood out for y'all as you were attending the sessions. So Kim, this time I'll start with you. What was something that really stood out to you in one of the sessions you attended?
Just a sense of community and the sense of people really coming together in a city that has had quite a bit of tragedy and has gone through a lot of adversity, and just a sense of really wanting to move forward, and how many voices were there to say that. And whether you were there in person, whether you were there, through a camera, the comments that were coming in, the support that was coming in, these people were from all over the country and all over the world. And so it was a St. Louis, racial equity summit, but I almost felt like you're speaking to a nation that's healing. So for me, just that sense of how do we move forward, and even thinking of our members, building community, community things within the community. How does this work within your community? How does this apply? That's been a lot of what I've been thinking of since going to the conference, being in member services and working in the St. Louis area. It's just really applying some of that to the member programs that they gave out there, and helping them see things a little differently. I think that they did a great job. I mean, it was a packed few days. I know all conferences are, but I thought they did a good job of speaking to all sides of the coin and not just flipping it from this is our stance and here's what we want you to hear, but really offering people to speak on how they really felt. And so for me, that was important, and just being able to hear the other sides and consider them, being able to say, well, I don't really agree with that, but let me listen to why they're saying it. And that's how change happens, is through that conversation, being able to hear how you feel, how I feel, where's the middle ground, where do we start? We were talking earlier about meeting people where they are, and just that whole idea of being able to start where they are and then branching out and where we are as well. I'm including myself in that. So I thought that it was a really good thing. It seems like it would not be related to the work we do. And I kept thinking, like, how do I relate this? But the longer they talked and the more they, the community needs and just community building as a whole, I'm like, well, this is how it relates right here. So I was excited to get to go. I'm excited to bring it back to the members when we figure out, exactly how that looks. And yeah, just as a whole, I think they did a really good job at bringing so many different ideas, and people these days can't speak to each other with opposing views. So it was good that people that could, to see this example of this is how this is supposed to look. You're supposed to be able to have these conversations that can get heated, but this is how you come together and have them. So for me, that was my main takeaway, was just enjoying being in a place with a huge pool of different people, but people being able to agree that there are things that need to change, and that equity as well as justice needs to happen. So for me, that was a big takeaway.
I definitely agree with you, Kim. I found that theme in the workshops and keynotes that I attended as well. And something that I think really stood out for me in the workshops that I attended is how it challenged me to think about things differently. And so, as you and I were kind of debriefing it after attending, there were a couple things that presenters said that I was still really kind of struggling with. So thinking about how things like logic models and capacity building tools can be used to further white supremacy in nonprofit organizations and in a lot of health and racial equity work. And so I needed to hear from other folks who have viewed logic models as a tool of assimilation, how folks have viewed capacity building tools as a way of having people overlook the individuals doing the work and instead focus more on the project outcomes. And while I hadn't thought about that from my own lived experience, hearing that from other people put it in a really different perspective for me. And so I agree with you. I think being able to just engage in dialogue with so many different perspectives really helped to expand the conversation in really great ways. And so it also stood out for me that even though the sessions that I attended might not have directly related to sexual and domestic violence prevention, the concepts of the work and the philosophies behind it 100% translate and are so important for us to consider in our work.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, there was a lot of things that were parallel. There were a lot of concepts and things that were, and it was just great to see people rallying for something. You know, right now the country is fighting against everything. I mean, you can't turn the news on without somebody fighting about something. What, you know, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask, to vaccinate. You know, it's always a conversation. But to see people actually coming together and say, we're going to rally behind this city. And that was just like I'm not from St. Louis. And there was a lot I didn't know going into this conference. But just to see that rally cry was really, it was refreshing. You know, like they're not fighting against each other in this matter. They're coming together to say, this is how you work together. This is how change happens. So yeah, I totally agree. There were some good things that are parallel, and it was just really refreshing to see, as we do in our movement, as in a DVSV movement, we come together to try to figure out how to further it. So it was good to see that in other areas as well, and not the constant fighting amongst yourself kind of moment.
Yep, agree. Well, Huvona, I want to turn it over to you and then Heidi to talk about some of the stuff that you were really excited to engage with at NSAC.
Sure. So one of the things that I really liked was Lisa Parks with the Prevention Institute was talking about the 4 defining features of public health approach to healing and from doing any kind of work when it comes to prevention of sexual abuse and any kind of assault. And she used, the first one was like truth, racial healing, and transformation. So we can't start healing until we actually recognize where everything is rooted in. And there are deep roots there. And although you may not understand it, you have to acknowledge it. And how can you do that besides going to the next thing, which is community leadership and power? So again, just like you all were talking about the Racial Equity Summit, we still have to be in community, in collaboration. Although we may not agree because our experiences are different, you have to reflect upon that because that's where all of this is rooted at. And then data and evidence driven. A lot of the data and evidence can go beyond just like your regular data that collection that you do from prestigious institutes, but sometimes that data is people's lived experiences, their stories. They may not have been able to be a part of a particular moment when everything was being documented. But if you can just listen to those in the community, you can hear their lived experiences. You can look at the policies that were in place before that may have held people down in oppressive behaviors from simply just looking at it. That's data that's there that you don't need to collect. And then lastly, it went on to naming and build a way to do collaborative action. So yes, this happened. Yes, we understand it, but we want to talk to those in the community who it affects the most. So you can use your platform of where you're at to talk with the person in the community and see, okay, what is it that we can do for your community? What is it that you need? How can we destructuralize some of these things that are in place that are hindering you from getting to another point? And what is it that you need? If that means sharing funding, if that means allowing them to have flexible funding so that they can do some of these things, letting those be the experts who actually teach it. So coming into a community and trying to tell them what they need is only good if you actually know what it is that they need. And it may not be heard from someone else. You can be there to support, but let those leaders in the community be lifted up and let their voices be heard, because they're there. Once you leave and you get done presenting, who's still going to be in that community to have this conversation? Who can they relate to? They're going to have to email you, reach out to you. But if they know they can go to the Boys and Girls Club down the street when they have an issue, or they know that this particular teacher or this organization is in their community, it's easier for them to go to look for help and to find ways to build resources and build certain things that they need, because they don't have to wait for someone to respond that's miles away or, you know, somewhere else. So I really love like sharing that leadership. Like, yes, you may have those tools because you are at a higher level. However, just share that leadership and share that responsibility within those who is affected the most. So I really love like how it just kind of worked out like, so here it is. How does community work? Well, in one of the workshops I was in, this is how it works, just reaching out to who you are. And with me being a partnership development coordinator, I'm all about that. Like, who do we know that we can put together and have the same conversation, because we want this message to get across. So healing may look different for me than it does for the 12-year-old now. It may look different for me in an urban area than it does for someone that's more in a rural area. So just kind of meeting people where they are and learning and learning together, and then being able to uplift others to do that work. Because at the end of the day, we still want the same outcome, right? Ending violence against women, ending violence against everybody, no matter what your gender identity is. But you can't tell somebody else what they need if you don't identify and you're not living that experience. So that was one of my biggest takeaways from it.
That sounds like a phenomenal workshop. Big fans of the Prevention Institute already, but yep. Yeah, imagine that whenever you have shared leadership and community engagement and investment, your prevention strategies go much further. So yeah, that sounds like a really fantastic workshop.
Yes, it really was.
It also sounds like they were speaking the same things that we were hearing in our conference.
Yeah.
As she's speaking, I'm like, didn't we hear like some of these same notes? So it's amazing to hear two conferences stating the same issues and trying to find workarounds. So that's what I was hearing as she was speaking.
Kim, I was thinking the same thing. Two very different conferences, but the same concepts are being talked about and discussed. So I had that same thought, and I love that we all went right there with it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm going to continue that, because with what you had said about equity and justice, that is exactly what Lydia XC Brown presented in their session, with the plenary session and in their separate breakout session. So one of the things that they talked about was disability justice, and talking about how it had been created within the last 15 years. And 80 to 90% of disabled individuals have been assaulted at least once in their lifetime. And then half of those individuals that are female by birth will be sexually assaulted at least 18 times before they're the age of 18. Those statistics just penetrated my brain to a point where I was like, I have to listen to what the breakout session was. So the title of the breakout session, it was one of the most attended breakout sessions of the whole conference. And they actually had like a number counter, and it was the one that was like filling up the fastest. I know that me and Huvona were touching base with each other to make sure that both of us could get into that session. But what they talked about the most was ableism. And ableism, at its most basic definition, is an entire system of thinking and doing that hurts disabled people and people with disabilities. One of the things that I did not really realize and did not think about is that disabled people or people with disabilities, that's really like an English distinction. And so in other countries and in other languages, that's really not a way to look at people with disabilities, like how they actually say the words. And so when it's the person first language, it came from the self-advocates with intellectual disabilities, and who had been institutionalized. And so they really looked at it as had been diagnosed, and they were stripped of their personal humanity because of it. So they refer to themselves as people with disabilities. But people that say disabled people, they look at that as their culture. And so they want to put their culture first. So like blind, deaf, and autistic communities really will put that disabilities first, for that disabled first, because that is part of their culture, is to be identified in that culture as that person. So I felt like that was really interesting because I had never thought of it that way. Being a social worker, I've always been taught it's people with disabilities, but that's actually like a social work construct that we have made. So some of the other things is it really did get to looking at the biases within myself and not even thinking like about them. Like it's just very natural on how we have all been taught as we've grown up about what a person looks like and acts like. And so really looking at ableism as this illusion of wellness and functioning. And so for a disabled person, they try to look and function as a normal person. And so it really does make that more of an unequitable type of approach. So really looking at like how we're providing spaces for individuals. Is there a sensory friendly space? Do you have one? Do you know of where one is? Or even plain language posters on walls so that somebody can read them. And what's the size of those prints? Like, are they really small? It even got me thinking about like with PowerPoint presentations, like even though we're in Zoom world, like, and you can zoom into those, like how big are our presentations? Are we allowing for folks that are not able to see very well to, or that have to have those larger print? Are we looking at that more? It really just opened my eyes of the different things that we really just take for granted, or we just don't think about when thinking about folks with disabilities. Also, like one of the other parts that was talked about is like how we talk about healthy relationships, and folks, individuals with disabilities will sometimes not even be taught about those healthy relationships. And I know that's something that Sammy has been bringing into our medical training as well too. So when I was hearing it, I was like, oh yes, that's what we've been talking about. So just all of that, and really just taking a step back myself to be like, can everyone see that? Will that be able for everybody? And so really that equity, that justice of piece was really significant in that session.
I really like you brought that up, Heidi, because that was something else that was brought up, was like the differently abled should be a part of the storytelling as well. Like, where are their statistics at if no one is actually asking them? And they were talking about how they can use like photo voice. I think that was the name of it, for them to tell their story. Like, does everybody really know about that? And like, that's part of the way that they can tell their story, like just trying to be equitable with everything. I really like that you brought that up, because sometimes that is a demographic that is forgotten and their story is not told, and no one is allowing them to have the same access that is available to them on their level. So
yeah, wow. Hearing both of you talk about that made me it made my mind start going in 1,000 different directions. And so yeah, absolutely, that definition of ableism that you shared, Heidi, made me think back about how we talk about equity and how we talk about justice. And I think, it's no coincidence that they named the workshop disability justice then, after really hearing you talk about it. And wow, those statistics that you shared are just so incredibly alarming. And I think if we aren't if we aren't giving folks the opportunity to share their lived experience and give voice to that experience and their trauma, then yeah, we really are further marginalizing folks who are already at an increased risk. So, wow, that sounds like a really, really powerful keynote and workshop.
Oh, it super was. Huvona and I want to be their new best friend. So
we did.
Well, tying it back to member benefits, that sounds like it could be a really great training for us to try and bring to Missouri. I know that there are folks in Missouri who are really thinking about rights of individuals who do have disabilities and how we incorporate that into our work. So I think that could be a really beneficial conversation to us, for us to engage in, rather, here in Missouri too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Huvona, you said something a moment ago about the importance of being in community. And so I want to go back to that for a minute, because something that I think we all really look forward to when we attend conferences and summits is that opportunity to network and be in community with other like-minded folks. And so I'm curious to hear from the three of you, what opportunities were there to engage in that community virtually? How did they try to recreate that opportunity in this virtual space? So I'll go ahead and keep with you, Heidi, and then go to Huvona and then Kim.
So NSAC did a really great job this year. They used some sort of platform. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but you signed into it and you could pick the sessions that you wanted to go to. And it automatically went into a calendar. And then you also had a list of every participant. So they really encouraged you to put your photo, your email address, any kind of information, where you're from, who you're with, and you could look A through Z of any participant that was there. I'll let Huvona talk about like the main chat, because I didn't find it until the very last day, at the very last moment. But in each of the sessions, before you even got in, they had a chat as well. So you got to participate in chat that way, participate in chat in the sessions, participate in the chat during the plenary sessions. And then they also had an exhibit hall, which, if you've ever been to NSAC, which I highly recommend once we are able to go in person, to go to NSAC, because it is amazing. Next year, it's, fingers crossed, it's in Washington, D.C., is they will have an exhibit hall that is filled to the brim with different exhibitors. And it's free merch. Like, you get all kinds of stuff. I did miss my pens, because I usually stocked up on my pens, but I got a lot of great information while I was there. They had pamphlets that you could download. They had workbooks you could download. They had all kinds of stuff that you could download and incorporate into your agency. So it was a really fun time.
Nice. I love whenever you can have those really specific takeaways to then bring back, share with your coworkers, and really like put that new information right into practice.
Yes, absolutely. There was some stuff on sexual harassment, and I was automatically sending that right over to Sammy so that she could get it. So it was really good. Nice.
How about you, Huvona?
Yeah, I agree. I really like the exhibitors, although I didn't get to get the free merch. It still was pretty cool because you could actually like chat with them. So it was kind of like you were there. So if you had questions about anything, like they knew you were there and they would follow up like, hey, you visited my virtual exhibitor booth. Do you have any additional questions? Is there any way we can, collaborate, talk a little bit more? So that was pretty cool that you didn't just get to go view it and download stuff. Like they were there like for live chat, and certain ones would be open between certain times, which was nice. So everybody wouldn't be there at the same time. So I really, really enjoyed that. I did like the main chat, as we were all like anticipating getting into a room that we really wanted to. And if we thought we were like in a waiting room, and then like technical issues happen, other folks was like, oh no, log out and log back in. So it was interactive in that aspect. So I really liked that it wasn't just like no comments, or sometimes they turn off the chat and things of that nature, and it wasn't anything like that. And it was pretty fun because you can also see like some of the folks on Facebook saying, hey, I'm here, and like some people that you may have connected with over the years, like, oh, I'm here too. Are you in this session? Oh, what was that? So it was just really pretty cool to kind of be able to still relate, even though it was through chat and wasn't in person. It still was a nice way to be like, oh, I haven't seen you in a long time. Oh, you presented. Oh, one of my past leaders that I had when I was in the LEAP program with Women of Color Network and Valor Us, which is formerly CalCASA, she was one of the co-facilitators of one of moderators of one. So I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like I haven't seen her in like 3 years. So it was nice to private chat like that as well. But I thought it was pretty good because it was so many people involved and chatting and like introducing themselves that you didn't feel like you were just there navigating by yourself. And also when you can go with a coworker, you can also be like, hey, did you get in? I can't get in yet. So that's always kind of cool as well.
Nice. So it sounds like, for the National Sexual Assault Conference to be such a big event every year that many, many people attend, they did a really good job of recreating those opportunities to connect with one another and really try and build that sense of community in a virtual space.
For sure. They definitely did.
Great. Well, Kim, how about from your perspective with the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit?
I thought it was done really well. Before the conference started, they sent out an email, which I only got the day of. We had some technical glitches, but they sent out a cocktail or a mocktail. So after the keynote speaker of the entering keynote speaker, I'm fangirling again. It was Edgar. And after he spoke and they had a couple of little things, then they had cocktail hours. So I thought that was really cool. That they sent out the recipe so everybody could have the same cocktail. So that was kind of cute and a way to do it. They also had yoga sessions, which I really appreciated because a lot of the material that they were presenting was very heavy for a lot of people. It's things just like in NSAC, it's things that people have lived through. Some of them, it was very traumatic for them and they were having to relive it. And so giving people sessions like the yoga sessions, and they had some of those, they didn't call it, I'm not sure what they call it. They had booths, I think is what they called it, where like they had different people in different organization. And one of them that they had on there was a mental health type organization. So I thought it was interesting that they even thought about self-care in the process of, okay, we're going to be hitting them and with some pretty heavy stuff here. Are we balancing it with something that they can do to kind of debrief, for some people. We had the chat features as well, and it was blowing up. Oh my gosh, it was hard to keep up. There was so much going on in chat. And it was good to be able to ask your questions and to actually hear them answer them. So many times you go to things, you ask questions, and then you're like, nobody answered my question. And so it was good to be able to just have that opportunity, that moment. But overall, I think they did as good a job as they can do on Zoom. I mean, let's be real. It's kind of hard sometimes when you're on Zoom to just really try to encourage people to connect. And, I think that that's important so that you had and I liked it because when you go to a conference, sometimes you don't have the information on the people, but like here, their names, email addresses, all of that was there. So while they're speaking, I don't have to go and ask them for it, or I don't have to make sure I wrote it down off the screen. I can be taking my time to do it. So I really appreciated the amount of information about a certain speaker or even people who were just in the audience, that they had, so that, yeah, you can connect with those people. So I thought they did a good job on that.
I agree, Kim. The first thing that I thought of was how they had the recipe for the cocktail or mocktail that they sent out. I thought that was a really creative way of recreating those sort of happy hour events that always happen at conferences. And if you can't be there in person to do them, then that's a very cute and easy thing to do to try and recreate it. And I also agree with you. I really liked that in the platform that they used, every participant had their own profile that then they could update and add in as much or as little information as they felt comfortable. But that opportunity to personalize your profile meant I can put up a picture that I feel comfortable sharing with others. I can put my personal pronouns in there. I can put my job title and where I work. And that's also things that really help to create that sense of community and connection between people.
I know my Twitter list grew afterwards because everybody had Twitter in there. So I was just like, what's their Twitter? What's their Twitter? Like, I felt like that was the easiest way to see what you're saying. You know, like it is hard in the digital age to stay connected because there's so much to stay connected to. But I was like, you know, if I add them there, at least I'll see some of the things that their organization are doing, and then I can go and check it out. So yeah, I agree. You could put all kinds of stuff on there, your website, I mean, everything, like pretty much anything you wanted. So yeah, I think they did a really good job.
I just love that they had like yoga and meditation available and mental health, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That is so great because it's really, a lot of the conferences are about self-care and making
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're taking care of yourself and filling that cup. But to actually have it available virtually, that's amazing. That's awesome.
I said it before when I talked about this conference, it did not feel like a St. Louis conference. It felt like a national company came in, like, you know, you went to NSAC, right? And that's a national organization. It did not feel like a St. Louis conference. Like, I felt like I was sitting at something much bigger than that. And I feel like because of all the people they had that came together to get it together, I think that it's a very eclectic group if you see who their planning people are. So I think that was one of the reasons why, you know, mental health was something that they were worried about. It's a heavy subject and people are already dealing with so many things in life. So yeah, I was super impressed by it. It was like a recorded session. So it wasn't like someone live doing yoga, but the fact that they even gave the space. I mean, whether you wanted to do it or just relax in the room, that was completely up to you, you know? So I really did appreciate that effort to make sure that part of the session was also taken care of.
Well, I want to build on that just a little bit with the final question that I'll pose for us. And, you know, it's really thinking about how with the coalition, part of why we prioritize professional development for staff so much is so that we can really stay abreast of these larger trends that are happening in organizational change and management, prevention and intervention, and then also the intersecting social justice topic areas that we know directly impact our work too. And so I want to build on what you were just saying, Kim, by asking what were some of these larger trends that really stood out for all of you as you were attending. And the reason that I think it's such a nice transition is, Kim and Heidi, something that you were just talking about, that oftentimes in conferences, we do see mental health being prioritized, self-care being prioritized, but actually creating a space in your virtual platform to encourage that is such a really important thing to pay attention to. And I do see that as part of the larger trend in a lot of the conferences and summits and conversations in our work, is that we're doing a much better job now of going beyond talking about self-care as taking a walk at the end of the day or taking a bubble bath, and not to diminish those as being good forms of taking care of yourself, but really giving concrete ways of, in the moment when you need to take care of yourself, here's the space to go and do it. So I really like that y'all talked about that, because it was as if there were a plan, a perfect transition into the last thing I wanted to talk to y'all about. So yeah, I'll open it up to the three of you now. Any of the things that stood out for kind of these larger trends for members to really be thinking about?
I can go first. Two of the larger trends that I saw was uplifting the voices of everyone and not just a particular community. They spoke not only about minority organizations, but the Indigenous organizations were able to have a platform to talk about the work that they're doing for Indigenous people, the differently abled, and I just really like that. And the other thing was economic justice. So about, you know, yes, we need these funds to do that, but the funds need to be available for everyone. Yes, we need to encourage wage increases for not only survivors who are working in different areas, but my organizations as well, because you know, when folks are paid a great rate, they're able to advocate on behalf of others, and realizing it's nothing that's going to happen overnight, but to work towards that, like, so that we can end violence against women, so that they can be economically stable, but also making sure that we realize that those that are affected most with that are marginalized communities, and just something that we need to do across the whole nation, really. So I really like that they all kind of talked about that and the different ways that they're trying to do that, in different ways that you can try to implement it just by starting, somewhere little. It's not going to happen overnight. It may be a 5 to 7 year process, but you have to start somewhere. So I really like that.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because so I was struggling with who I was going to talk about more. And Jamia Wilson, who is the vice president and executive editor of Random House, that was so what she had talked about, is bringing voice to those to be heard, and bringing voice to the margins, or from the margins in. And it just, she just did an excellent job. And that really was, I think, really was what NSAC really was about this year, was really raising up those voices, looking at communities and how communities really can transform the way justice is served, and looking at that. And I just really appreciated everything that I was able to learn.
I think I was trying to think of some trends, like there were so many, right? Because it was so many things going through my head, and my list taking self was like, but I think the main one that I took away from it was that they really tried to remind people about the value in person. And so not the value of maybe a race of people or an organization or any of those things, but to really remember to place value in individuals. And I think that is where a lot of times we forget about that. We group people in groups, and we say, okay, so this group needs, but we forget about the value of really the person that's inside the group. So that was one that really just kind of made me think about the way I view, my own unconscious biases and my own things that maybe, like Heidi said earlier, you group people together and you say, well, this is what it is. But remembering to break the group down, and that it's made out of 5 people. These are individuals. They're not just a group. That was one of the trends. And the other trend was just a sense of community. Like, there are power in numbers, and it was seen. It was seen. I mean, people around the world wanted to talk about what was happening in St. Louis, Missouri. Like, that was crazy to me. Not being the biggest city in America, not being, the capital or but just seeing a sense of community and really knowing that people are hungry for that. People are really hungry to see progress, and people are really hungry to belong to a community that's being able to make some of those progress and things happen. So I think there were a lot of trends that were coming out of it, and it sounds like a lot of the trends were like overlapping between the 2 conferences, which is really, I love it. Like it's love it, because that means everybody's, really, really are pushing forward to some of the things that need to be pushed forward. So I think those were a couple of the trends that just really stuck out to me. It's just the community and the power of self, like, the power of value, so for me, that's what really stuck out.
Kim, I agree with you. I think that it's really incredible, as we've had this conversation today, that there are so many comparisons that were happening at the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit and also happening at the National Sexual Assault Conference. And I think that it's really amazing that we have these concepts happening in dialogue, not only across Missouri, but across the United States. And so, really putting the value and worth on individuals and on whole communities, lifting up marginalized individuals and communities and giving them voice. And I think that those are really important and incredible conversations for us to be having, not only here in our state, but seeing people across the United States connecting and engaging in those together. Something that, as the three of you were talking, also really made me think back to the Equity Summit is that people were saying they felt a sense of pride in St. Louis, that St. Louis is leading from the middle. And I feel that very much in the conversation that we had today, that, we in Missouri working to unite folks to end rape and abuse, I feel like we are leading from the middle. We're doing really great work here in the middle of the United States. And so a good example of that is us being able to attend these other conferences and bring it back and say, yeah, in Missouri, we're doing really cool work and we're organizing and advocating and educating folks around this work. Well, I want to say a big thank you to the three of you for being on this episode. I think if there's one thing that I can say to tie all of this together, it's that members now have a very strong endorsement to attend both the National Sexual Assault Conference and the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit in 2022. Hopefully, they are not overlapping in 2022 as they were this year, so that everybody can attend both, ideally, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, again, thank you so much for the three of you being on this episode. Really appreciate you sharing out the things that stood out for you. And hopefully, I'm going to say more to come for us to be able to share with members. All right. Thanks all.